Most financial advice sounds the same after a while. Spend less than you earn, build an emergency fund, invest early, avoid debt. These aren't wrong, they're genuinely good advice. But if you've been in the world of personal finance for any amount of time, you've heard them so many times that they've stopped landing. They've become wallpaper, present everywhere, noticed by nobody. And yet, for most people, the relationship with money hasn't changed. The anxiety is still there. The month still feels too short for the paycheck. The savings account still grows slower than the sense that it should be growing faster. The knowledge is available, the change isn't happening, which suggests that the problem was never a lack of information. It was something else, something upstream of the tips and the strategies and the five-step plans, something at the level of how we fundamentally think about money, what it is for, what it represents, what a healthy relationship with it actually looks and feels like from the inside. In Japan, this upstream level is where the conversation about money has always lived. Not in the tactics, in the philosophy, in the set of deeply held beliefs about human nature, about desire, about time, about enough. Beliefs that shape financial behavior so naturally and so completely that most Japanese people don't experience them as financial rules at all. They experience them simply as the way life is lived. There are 6 of these principles, not 6 tips, not 6 habits to add to your morning routine. 6 ways of understanding money and life that, once absorbed, make the tactics follow almost automatically. And if you let them, they will change not just how you manage your finances, but how you feel about them every single day. Let's begin. Before we get to the 6 principles, there's something worth understanding about why Japanese financial philosophy works the way it does. Japan is not a country without financial struggle. It has faced economic stagnation, deflation, natural disasters, demographic decline, and a cost of living in its major cities that rivals the most expensive places on earth. The Japanese people are not wealthy by virtue of luck or geography. They are, as a culture, financially stable by virtue of something else entirely. A set of deeply internalized beliefs about the relationship between human beings, their desires, and their material world. These beliefs did not come from financial planning seminars. They came from centuries of Buddhist and Shinto philosophy, from Confucian ethics around family and duty, from the aesthetic traditions of wabi-sabi and mono no aware, from the practical necessities of island life with limited natural resources. They are old. They are layered, and they are extraordinarily well-suited to the challenge that modern consumer culture poses to everyone trying to save, invest, and build a life that feels financially sustainable. What follows are 6 principles distilled from that tradition, principles that are not theoretical but lived daily in millions of Japanese households right now. Principle 1. Shizen. Let your finances breathe naturally. The Japanese word shizen means nature or naturalness, but it carries within it a philosophical weight that the English word doesn't quite capture. In Zen tradition, shizen describes the state of things when they are allowed to unfold according to their own nature, without force, without interference, without the anxious human impulse to control every outcome before it arrives. Applied to personal finance, shizen is a profound corrective to one of the most damaging patterns in Western money culture. The exhausting, counterproductive habit of forcing financial transformation through willpower alone. Most people approach saving as an act of pure discipline. They set a target, they clench against their own desires, they white-knuckle their way through the month, and they either succeed through sheer force or collapse and spend what they were trying not to spend, and then feel worse than if they'd never tried at all. This cycle is not just unpleasant, it is structurally unsound. Willpower, as decades of psychological research have confirmed, is a depletable resource. It runs out. And the harder you push against your own nature, the faster it depletes. Shizen offers a different model. Instead of forcing behavior change through restriction, it asks, what environment, what structure, what natural arrangement of your financial life would make the desired behavior the path of least resistance? How can you design your finances so that saving happens naturally, not because you're fighting yourself, but because the system you've built makes it the easiest thing to do? This is why the Japanese practice of automatic transfers, moving savings to a separate account the moment income arrives, before any spending decisions are made, is not experienced as discipline in Japanese households. It is experienced as shizen. The money flows naturally to where it needs to go, without requiring a daily act of will. The structure does the work. It's like the difference between trying to make a river flow uphill and simply clearing the path so it can flow downhill on its own. The water doesn't need encouragement, it needs unobstructed direction. Your money is the same. You don't need more willpower. You need a more natural arrangement. Because here's the thing, every financial habit that feels like a struggle is a signal, not that you lack discipline, but that the structure around that habit is working against your nature rather than with it. Shizen asks you to stop fighting and start designing. Try this. Identify one financial behavior you've been trying to force through willpower alone, and ask what structural change would make it feel natural instead. An automatic transfer, a physical envelope, a rule so simple it requires no daily decision. Designed for ease, not for struggle. Principle 2. Ma, the wealth that lives in empty space. We have touched on the concept of Ma in earlier videos, but its financial implications run deeper than any single habit can capture. Ma, the Japanese concept of meaningful empty space, of the pause between things, is one of the most economically radical ideas in all of Japanese philosophy. Western financial culture has an almost theological belief in fullness. Full schedules, full portfolios, full weekends, full shopping carts. The empty space is where anxiety lives, the unfilled hour, the unspent budget, the bare wall. And the reflexive response to anxiety in a consumer culture is to fill it. Buy something, subscribe to something, book something. The emptiness is the problem, consumption is the solution. Ma proposes the exact opposite. In Japanese aesthetics, the empty space is not the problem, it is the point. The silence between musical notes is not the absence of music, it is what gives the notes their meaning. The negative space in a painting is not where the art runs out, it is where the eye can breathe, rest, and understand what it's looking at. Financially, Ma manifests as the deliberate preservation of space, in your budget, in your schedule, in your life, that is not filled, not allocated, not committed to any purpose. It is a buffer, yes, but it is more than a buffer. It is a declaration that your life does not need to be at maximum capacity to be full. Japanese households that practice budgeting in the Kakebo tradition typically build what they call a breathing room allocation, a portion of monthly income that is designated for nothing in particular. Not savings, not spending, not investment, just space. And what research into Japanese household finances consistently shows is that this space doesn't get wasted. It gets used, eventually, for genuine needs. The unexpected car repair, the medical expense, the gift for a friend, without touching the savings that were meant for something else. But the deeper effect of Ma is psychological. When you have empty space in your finances, when not every dollar is committed before it arrives, the scarcity mindset that drives so much impulse spending begins to ease. You are no longer running on the edge of your resources. You have room. And room, it turns out, is one of the primary conditions for making good decisions. Research from Harvard economist Sendhil Mullainathan, published in his book Scarcity, found that financial scarcity, the feeling of not having enough, reduces cognitive bandwidth in ways that are measurable and significant. People under financial pressure make measurably worse financial decisions, not because they are less intelligent, but because scarcity consumes mental resources that would otherwise be available for clear thinking. Ma is the antidote. Empty space in your budget creates room in your mind, and room in your mind makes every financial decision better. Try this. Look at your current monthly budget. Is there any space in it? Any amount that isn't already spoken for? If not, that is important information. Even a small, protected breathing room, 2 or 3% of income, begins to create the conditions for clearer thinking and calmer choices. Principle 3. Kanketsu, the power of finishing what you have. The Japanese word kanketsu means completion or conclusion, the bringing of something to its natural end. And in Japanese consumer culture, particularly among older generations, kanketsu describes a practice that is almost revolutionary in the context of modern consumption, finishing what you have before acquiring more. The tube of toothpaste used until it is genuinely empty, the bottle of shampoo tipped upside down and filled with water to get the last 3 washes out of it, the notebook filled to its final page before a new one is opened. These are not poverty practices. In Japan, they are expressions of respect for the resources used to create the object, for the money spent to acquire it, and for the discipline of attention that kanketsu requires. In financial terms, the practice of kanketsu addresses one of the most quietly expensive habits of modern life, the replacement of things before they are finished. The phone replaced not because it has stopped working, but because a newer one exists. The wardrobe expanded not because the current clothing is worn out, but because the season changed and the algorithm knew it. The pantry restocked not because the shelves are empty, but because the grocery store made something look appealing. A 2022 study by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau estimated that the average American household spends between $1,200 and $1,800 per year on replacement purchases for items that were still functional, not broken, not obsolete, simply replaced before they reached their useful end. That is a number worth sitting with. Kanketsu doesn't ask you to use things until they fall apart. It asks you to notice when something is genuinely finished before deciding it needs to be replaced. It asks you to develop a sensitivity to the difference between "this is done" and "I'm bored with this," between "I need something new" and "I'm habituated to what I have and seeking novelty." It's like the difference between leaving a meal half-eaten and clearing the plate, not because you force yourself to eat what you don't want, but because you plated the right amount in the first place, and you eat with enough attention to recognize when you're actually full. Kanketsu, financially, is about right-sizing what you bring into your life so that finishing it feels natural rather than depriving. And what accumulates over time, through thousands of small decisions to finish before replacing, is something remarkable. Not just money saved, though that is real and significant. A different relationship with objects, a quieter relationship with wanting. A life in which what you have is genuinely used, genuinely appreciated, genuinely finished, before the next thing begins. But if that principle shifted something in how you think about what you own, the next one addresses something even more foundational, the way you think about time itself. Try this. Walk through your home and identify 3 things you own that you haven't used in the last 30 days. Not because you've finished them, because you've simply forgotten them. Choose one to use completely before the month ends. Notice how finishing it feels. Principle 4. Choki Teki Shiko, the long view that changes every short-term decision. There is a phrase in Japanese business and financial culture that appears everywhere and means everything. Choki Teki Shiko, long-term thinking. The orientation of decisions not toward immediate return, but toward sustained, enduring outcome. Japanese companies are famous for this, for making investments that won't pay off for a decade, for building relationships before transactions, for prioritizing the health of the system over the performance of any single quarter. And this same orientation extends, culturally, into household finances. Where Western financial culture tends toward urgency, this quarter's returns, this month's budget, this year's bonus, Japanese financial culture tends toward what might be called generational patience. The understanding that the most important financial decisions you make today will not reveal their full consequences for 10, 20, or 30 years. And that this delay does not make them less real, it makes them more important. This is not abstract wisdom. It has concrete, measurable expression in Japanese financial behavior. According to data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Japanese households hold a significantly higher proportion of their financial assets in low-risk, long-term savings instruments than their counterparts in the United States, the United Kingdom, or Australia. Not because they earn more, because they think further. Choki Teki Shiko changes the experience of every short-term financial sacrifice. When you decline an unnecessary purchase today, it does not feel like deprivation. It feels like a contribution. A small, real, concrete contribution to a future that exists and matters and is approaching whether or not you prepare for it. It's like planting a tree. No one plants a tree for the shade they'll sit in next Tuesday. They plant it because they understand that time passes, that what you do with time compounds, and that the person who will eventually sit in that shade, whether it's you in 20 years or someone you love in 30, deserves the tree you could have planted today. This reframe is not just poetic, it is neurologically meaningful. Research from Stanford's psychology department found that people who were prompted to think about their decisions in 10-year rather than 10-day timeframes made measurably more conservative, more intentional financial choices, even when the actual decision in front of them was identical. The timeframe of thinking changes the quality of the decision. Choki Teki Shiko doesn't ask you to sacrifice the present for the future. It asks you to understand that the present and the future are not separate. Every decision you make today is simultaneously a present experience and a future contribution. The question is simply, what kind of contribution do you want it to be? Try this. Before your next significant financial decision, anything over $100, ask one question. How will I feel about this decision in 10 years? Not as a prohibition, as information. Let the answer inform, not dictate. Principle 5. Omoyari. Spend with the people you love in mind. Omoyari is a Japanese concept that has no precise English equivalent. It translates roughly as empathy or consideration for others, but it is more active than those words suggest. Omoyari is empathy in motion. It is the constant, practiced attention to how your actions affect the people around you and the willingness to let that awareness shape your choices. In financial culture, omoyari shows up in a way that Western personal finance almost never discusses. The consideration of how your spending choices today affect the people who depend on you. Your family, your partner, your children, your parents, even the community around you. Japanese household financial management has traditionally been understood not as an individual project, but as a family one. The household income is a shared resource. The household savings are a shared responsibility. The household debt is a shared burden. And decisions that affect those shared resources are made with an awareness of how they land on everyone in the system, not just the person making them. This is not about guilt or obligation. Omoyari is never about those things. It is genuinely about care. And the financial expression of care is surprisingly powerful as a motivator for savings. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that people who framed their savings goals in terms of family benefit, saving for my children's education, building security so my partner doesn't have to worry, showed significantly higher savings persistence than people who framed their goals in purely individual terms. Because here's the thing, pure self-interest is a relatively weak motivator for sustained behavioral change. We can talk ourselves out of self-interest easily. We deserve to enjoy this. We work hard. We'll start next month. But care for someone specific, someone whose face we can see, whose well-being we genuinely want, that is a different kind of fuel. It doesn't run out the same way. Omoyari says, your financial life is not only yours. The choices you make with money are acts of communication to your family, to your future, to the people who will live with the consequences of your choices alongside you. When you save, you are expressing care.
When you spend consciously, you are expressing care. When you build a floor that protects the people around you from the worst of what ordinary disruption can bring, that is Omoyari in action. Think about the oxygen mask instruction on an airplane. Put yours on first, then help others. This isn't selfishness. It's the only structure that actually works. You cannot care for the people you love from a position of financial chaos. Omoyari asks you to take care of your financial oxygen first, precisely because other people are breathing the same air. Try this. Write down the names of 2 or 3 people whose financial well-being is connected to yours. A partner, a child, a parent, a close friend you might one day need to help. Then write one sentence about what building your financial floor would mean for each of them. Let those sentences be a reason. Principle 6, Seiton, the order that creates freedom. The 6th and final principle comes from one of the most famous Japanese concepts in the entire world, and yet its financial application is almost never discussed. Seiton is the second of the 5 S's, the foundational principles of Japanese organizational philosophy developed in manufacturing contexts in the mid-20th century and now practiced in workplaces across the globe. Seiton means set in order. It means that everything has a designated place, that the arrangement of things is intentional and logical, and that this order is maintained not as an aesthetic preference, but as a functional necessity. In manufacturing, Seiton means that the tool you need is always exactly where you expect it to be. Because when it isn't, time is lost, errors are made, and the system suffers. The order exists not to look beautiful, but to make work flow. In personal finance, Seiton is perhaps the most immediately actionable principle of all 6. It means that your money has designated places.
A checking account for monthly expenses, a savings account for your floor, a separate account for specific goals, a budget category for each type of spending, and that these designations are honored with the same consistency that a Japanese manufacturing floor honors the placement of its tools. Because financial disorder is extraordinarily expensive, not just in the obvious ways, the overdraft fees, the missed bill payments, the subscriptions charging for services you forgot you subscribed to, but in the subtler ways, the decision fatigue that comes from managing money without a clear structure, the anxiety that settles in when you genuinely don't know how much is in which account and whether this purchase is safe. The hours spent trying to reconstruct what happened to last month's income because nothing was tracked and nothing was designated. Financial Seiton eliminates all of this, not through complexity, through simplicity.
Not through many accounts and many systems,
Through one clear, logical arrangement that you understand completely and can maintain without effort. It's like the difference between a kitchen where every utensil has a drawer and a kitchen where everything is in a pile somewhere. Both kitchens can cook the same meal, but in one of them, every cooking session begins with a search, and over time, the search, the friction, the small frustration of not knowing where things are, erodes the pleasure of cooking until you stop doing it altogether. Financial disorder has the same effect. It makes managing money feel hard when it doesn't need to be. Seiton says, simplify until you understand it completely. Structure until it takes care of itself. Order not as a control mechanism, but as a gift you give yourself. The gift of not having to think about the basics every time you look at your finances, because the basics are already in their place.
Try this. Map your current financial structure on a single piece of paper. Every account, every regular payment, every place money goes. If you can't do it in under 10 minutes, the structure is more complex than it needs to be. Seiton asks, what is the simplest possible arrangement that serves all your financial needs? Now, standing back from all 6 of these principles together, something becomes visible that each one alone can only suggest. Shizen, ma, kanketsu, chōki-teki shiko, omoiyari, seiton, naturalness, space, completion, long-term thinking, care for others, order. None of these are primarily financial concepts. They are life concepts, deeply held Japanese values about how human beings relate to the world, to each other, to time, and to the material things that pass through their hands. And their financial application is not a coincidence. It is the inevitable expression of a worldview. When your life philosophy includes a genuine appreciation for natural flow, you design financial systems that work with your nature rather than against it. When you understand the value of empty space, you stop filling every corner of your budget until it strains. When you practice completion, you stop replacing things before their time. When you think in decades, short-term sacrifices lose their weight. When you spend with the people you love in mind, saving becomes an act of generosity rather than restriction. And when you bring order to your financial life, the energy you were spending on managing chaos becomes available for living. This is what it means when we say these principles will change your finances forever. Not because you will follow 6 new rules, but because, absorbed deeply enough, these 6 ideas change the lens through which you see money entirely. And when the lens changes, everything you look at through it changes too. Japanese financial stability is not a mystery. It is not luck or genetics or some unique cultural advantage inaccessible to anyone who wasn't born into it. It is the natural result of these principles practiced daily in ordinary households by ordinary people who simply think about money in a way that makes stability possible. You can think that way too. It begins with one principle, the one that felt most true to something you already believed but hadn't yet named. Start there, just there. The rest will follow. What about you? Which of these 6 principles felt like something you've been living without a name for, or something you wish you'd encountered years ago? Tell me in the comments. I want to know which one landed. If this kind of conversation is what you've been looking for, the philosophical roots underneath practical financial change, delivered without urgency and without judgment, this is the channel where it lives. Every week, one more layer of this deep, enduring Japanese wisdom explored carefully and applied to the real financial lives most of us are actually navigating. If you want to be here when the next one arrives, subscribing takes 1 second, and what comes next is worth being here for.